first canto, 10th chapter, text 21. Generally, the two dots are how they call the Bible verses, but we use one dot. That's a small thing. You know, what do you call the semicolon?
Colon.
Colon, as a colon. So, for Bible verses, they use the semicolon, the colon. We use just a dot. It's a big thing.
Interesting.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 This is the first of the verses spoken by the ladies of Hastinapur. They're on the rooftops of the city, and they're looking at Krishna. So this is the first verse to speak. Savai kilayam purusha puratanu.
Savai kilayam purusha puratanu.
Ya eka asit avishesha atmani.
Eka Shira Visheshamani.
Agredunebhyo jagat atmanishvare. Nimitatmani supta shaktishu. Savai kilayam purusha puratano.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Ya eka asit avishesha atmani.
Eka Shira Visheshamani.
Agredunebhyo jagat atmanishvare.
Gunebhyo Jagadanishvare.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Yaeka Asita Visheshatmani.
Eka Shira Visheshamani.
Agre Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Nimiditatmanishi Sukta Shaktishu.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Yaeka Asira Vishesha Atmani.
Eka Shira Visheshamani.
Agre Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Militatmanishi Sutta Shaktishu.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Yaeka Shira Visheshatmani.
Yaeka Asira Vishesha Atmani.
Agre Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Agre Gunebhyo Jagadatmanishvare.
Militatmanishi Supta Saktishu.
Militatmanishi Sutta Shaktishu.
Savaikilayam Purusha Puratano.
Yaeka Asira Vishesha Atmani.
Agre Gunebhyo
Jagadatmanishvare.
He, Krishna.
Krishna.
I, as I remember,
As I remember,
Ila,
Ila,
definite.
definite.
I am
I am
this.
This
Purusha,
Purusha,
personality of God.
personality of God,
Puratanaha,
Puratana,
the original.
the original,
Yaha,
Ya,
U,
Eka,
Eka, only one.
only one,
Asit,
Asit,
existed.
existed,
Avishesha,
Avishesha,
materially unmanifest.
materially,
Atmani,
Atmani,
own self.
oneself,
Agre,
Agre,
before creation.
before creation,
Nidhya,
Nidhya,
of the modes of nature.
of the mode of nature,
Jagat Atmani,
Jagatmani,
unto the super soul.
unto the super soul,
Ishvare,
Ishvare,
unto the supreme Lord.
unto the Supreme Lord,
Nilita,
Nimita,
merged into
merged into
Atma,
Atman,
the living end.
the living entity,
Nishisutta,
Sutta,
inactive at night.
inactive at night,
Shakti Shuhu,
Shakti Sur,
of the energies.
of the energies.
Translation. They said, here he is, the original personality of Godhead, as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge, as if sleeping at night, their energy suspended. The proper purport, which talks about various things, not the shortest one, so we need to pay attention. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are two types of dissolution of the manifested cosmos. At the end of every 4,320,000,000 solar years, when Brahma, the Lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there is one annihilation. And at the end of Lord Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, in our calculation at the end of 8,604,000,000 into 30 into 12 into 100 solar years, there is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both the material energy called the Mahatattva and the marginal energy called Jiva Tattva merge into the person of the Supreme Lord. The living beings remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there is another creation of the material world. And that is the way of the creation, maintenance, annihilation of the material manifestation. The material creation is affected by the effect. Material creation is affected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, set in action by the Lord. And therefore, it is said here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation. And there was no Brahma, Shiva, or other demigods. Vishnu means the Mahavishnu, who is lying on the causal ocean. By his breathing only, all the universes are generated in seeds and gradually develop into gigantic forms with innumerable plants within each and every universe. The seeds of universes develop into gigantic forms in the way seeds of a banyan tree develop into numberless banyan trees. This Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of the Lord Shri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita as follows. Quote, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the original personality of Lord Govinda, whose plenary portion is the Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his exhaling, after the universes are generated from the pores of his transcendental body. Unquote. Brahma Samhita 558. Thus, Govinda, or Lord Krishna, is the cause of Mahavishnu also. The ladies talking about this very truth must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matter, definitely. There is no alternative. The merging of the living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean that the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there. And as soon as there is another creation by the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping, inactive living beings are again to let loose to begin their activities in the continuation of past different spheres of life. It is called Suptotita Nyaya, or awakening from sleep and again engaging in one's respective continuous duty. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of him, of his waking state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do and thus engages himself again in his prescribed activities. The living beings also remain merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation. But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:18-20. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not the product of the material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there is no difference between his body and himself. Before creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one. Namo Vishwavadaya Vishwavastadure Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Vinamine Namaste Saraswati Bhagavan Sujani Vishesa Sunyavadi Vasvati Vishwavadaya Mancharat Parvisa Sirasundara Patidanam Bhavayabhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Once again, if you like to repeat. They said, here he is.
Here he is.
The original personality of God.
The original personality of God.
As we definitely remember him.
As we definitely remember him.
He alone existed.
He alone existed.
Before the manifested creation.
Before manifested creation.
Of the modes of nature.
The mode of nature.
And in him only.
And in him only.
Because he is the Supreme Lord.
Because he is the Supreme Lord.
All living beings merge.
All living beings merge.
As if sleeping at night.
As if sleeping at night.
Their energy suspended.
Their energy suspended.
So the ladies are there in Hastinapur, they look at Krishna, and as you can see, they have a very deep and clear philosophical grasp. They see Krishna through the eyes of knowledge. Because obviously what they are describing is not visible. When you see Krishna walking, you see a person, medium size, human size. You see a person, a prince, and so on. But they knew about Krishna. They knew that he's also this. He's also the Purusha, Puratma, the original, very old in the sense, endlessly old, eternal. He was existing, Asit, when there was nothing. When there was nothing, he was still existing. Avishesha. Avishesha means there was no variety. Vishesha, variety, avishesha. And there was no material variety. There was nothing. And agre means at the beginning, when the gunas did not start interacting or creating the fiber of this manifested world. Yeah? So the Atmas, they were in him, Sukta, Nishi Sukta Saktishu, their energies, or energies in the sense of their activities, the thinking, feeling, willing, the desires were suspended. They were not eradicated. At the end of the creation, we are whatever we are when it happens. And we still have all the desires and ambitions and baggage and karma, personal karma. But somehow that gets kind of zipped. And zip stays with the soul and goes inside Mahavishnu. And then when the Jiva souls are manifested again, when we are manifested again, we come out again, we still have the same consciousness of the previous creation. Wherever we are, and so we take different forms according to that. Whoever was a dog becomes a dog, or maybe moves up a notch. I'm not sure if he becomes a dog. I don't know if he finished the dog experience. But whatever people were, they really become that. Like that. It just took a long break of 311 trillion years. Which again, it's very relevant because for Mahavishnu, it's just a breath. It's an intake or outtake of the air. So everything is so relative. And we see, even when we study material nature, we see, say, a tree. And we can relate to the size of the tree. Generally, a tree is much bigger, like this tree in Portugal is much bigger than a human being. If you analyze the biomass, will probably be, or the weight of this tree will be what? 200 times, 300 times a human being? Maybe it's more weight than an elephant, I don't know. But we can kind of relate, at least we relate because of habit. We may not, at least because it's around. Huh? It was a famous Hungarian mathematician, von Neumann, and one day when a student asked me, Professor von Neumann, there's something I don't understand in this particular thing. And I said, son, in mathematics you don't understand things, you just get used to them. So a lot of what we know or we are comfortable with, just because we get used to them. And because we get used to them, it's kind of normal. It's kind of normal. No? Arizona, there are these cactus. It's not really normal. I mean, if you think of it, I mean, there's no water, but this thing come up and survive. No? How does it work? Yeah, we get okay. They got, I don't know what they got. They got very deep root or what? I don't know how they work. I don't know. Somebody knows?
They contain a lot of water though.
Yeah, but where they get the water from? I mean, there's a lot.
They're able to hold it. The root
They
system.
hold it, okay,
Yeah.
they hold it.
Yeah.
But, it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing because there's no water, but they're full of water. Like the camels, now they fill water, they have this hump. They fill up with water. And we are okay with that. I mean, we don't make petitions or protests. The elephant, in the trunk of the elephant there are 50,000 muscles. Just the nose. I mean, our nose, there are very few, I guess. I don't know. I haven't counted them. But in an elephant nose, there are 50,000 muscles. And therefore, it's very, very versatile. Now, it looks very big, but they do a lot of things. They pick up things. And sometimes they pick even little grains sometimes they pick big trance. So it's a very versatile instrument. And of course, when one is out by evolution, they have 5 muscles, and then become 10 and 20, 50. No, I mean, anyway, evolution. And the giraffe, the neck. Anyway, we could go on and on and on. No, the Bhakti Notako, Shubhati Thakur sings Tumara Jagat Vichitra. It's a very Vichitra, very kind of marvelous. Marvelous in the sense, everything, if you really think of it, it's a source of marvel, a source of wonder, which is the meaning of wonderful. It means it fills you with wonder. You wonder about things. But, okay, that's one aspect. That we could say things that we can see, we can experience, cactuses or camels, like that. But then, if you go deep, you see the tree, then you take, say, a leaf. It's the same leaf, like that. And then you see that there are many processes in that leaf, very advanced processes of photosynthesis. They turn light into food. And an interesting thing is that in the Western world, they got the idea of the photosynthesis only about in the 18th century. For thousands of years, they did not know about photosynthesis. Even Aristotle, when he talks about plants, he just say, they get the food from the ground. But mostly they get the food from the sun. They turn the energy of the sun, the sunlight, into the metabolized. It's their food. The run. So you analyze it. Very interesting. Then you go deeper. You go into the structure of the leaf. You see there are cells. And they're very active. They're very organized. In each cell, see, one thing is the leaf. You get energy in the sense of the tree. But then in each cell does something like that. Each cell receives some energy, processes, gives it, grows, divides, dies, and so on. And then you go inside the cell, and there are molecules. There are different structures in the cell itself made by molecules. So the molecules are made of atoms. And the atoms, generally we have this, what we call the planetary model or orbit model of this atom with the nucleus and things going around. But that's a very, we could say, primitive conception. It's not like that. It's more like energy fields. But my point is, when you go either in the microcosm or in the macrocosm, the biggest, there's so much different variety and so much detail and so much design. Some most of you will be familiar with the fractal designs, those mathematical construct that they repeat themselves kind of endlessly. The same thing is, I don't know how you define a fractal. Yeah, they have loops, and then you go, there's the same design again, you go deeper, the same design. It's almost like a hologram, in which everything is in every part of the hologram. And so you have this amazing, and this is only what we see. Then there is the whole psychological real, which is even much more complex, the subconscious, where you keep stuff. People, what is the memory? See, this materialistic people think the memory must be somewhere in the brain. There must be some storage, like in a computer. You have the memory somewhere. And they made experiments, especially one, I don't remember the name, but one researcher made experiments, took these mouses, and they started, sorry to express this, but they started chopping off parts of the brain, no? They saw the graphic where they were cutting, cut here, cut there, and they found that wherever they were cut, the mouse would still have the same memory. So, so it's not in the brain. Of course, you can affect memory through affecting the brain, but doesn't mean the memory is in the brain. In other words, say for instance, I work on with a computer. If something happens to the computer, certainly my service would be affected. You know, like I need to show PowerPoint. Sorry, there's no PowerPoint today. But obviously, I'm different than the computer, than the memory of the computer. So even this thing of, there is a relation to the brain, but it's not physically stored anywhere. They couldn't find it. They couldn't find it. It's on a subtle level. It's on the level of the mind. And so, in other words, it's a great mystery. And often, I mean, they can influence certain things, but more or less they do by trial and error. No? They do certain things, something works, something don't work, do some experiment like that. So, the point I was focusing on is how that soul, we have our identity, material identity, the body, but also our material identity in the sense, our mood, our trajectory in life, our desires. So the all gets packed, we go inside Mahavishnu, and then Suttotita Nyaya. Nyaya means logic, Suttotita means getting up from sleep. So we get up from sleep, now Srila Prabhupada explained, we have this experience every day. We forget basically everything during the night, and then we wake up and we reconnect. Oh, yes, that's who I am, that's what I have to do, I have to do the polarity. And then we go to sleep and we dream something else, kind of beyond the time, beyond at least our perception of time. And this is going on and on and on and on. And the only way of knowing this, Srila Prabhupada says, in knowing who is the source, who is Krishna, and so on, is to listen from authoritative sources. And authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matter definitely. There is no alternative. There is no alternative because what would be the alternative? Either things that you can see with your eyes and other senses, and that's obviously a limited sphere. Other things are just beyond. Like it or not, we can't see everything. Or with logic, Anumana. But Anumana also is based on the senses, because you can only think about what you think, what you see. You can't think about something which you don't see. So the both are unlimited. They're usable and useful, because even the Shabda, even the transcendental knowledge we receive and process through our senses. So we cannot negate all sense perception, because if you negate all sense perception, you negate all knowledge. Because even the Shastra, we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which is authoritative source, but we use our mind, we use our senses. And of course, when the senses are more purified, the brain, when the intelligence is more purified, then we can access more, or we can understand more what it means. But at least we get the idea. We get the idea, the general idea of what this means. Are inside and outside everything. The gunas influence us psychologically, but the very matter is made of gunas. It's all gunas transformation. So it's not just some sort of rays, cosmic rays that gets to us. It's the fiber of everything. When you have the Mahatattva, the ego manifests. First of all, you can understand what is this ego, the block of ego, and then part of this ego in the mode of goodness transforms into the mind, into the devatas. Then part of ego in the mode of passion becomes buddhi, intelligence, and the senses. And then ego in the mode of ignorance transforms into the senses and the sense objects. So everything is guna. It's not just there is something and then the guna influences them. Everything is made of gunas. And when the gunas don't interact, and that's why it's very, very impalpable. Not everything looks solid, in touch, feel, but it's just because it's designed for us to have a sense of feeling. When you go down, 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 there's nothing. Physicists understand that it's not that there is something and something happens to them. Like it's not that there's a little ball and the atom goes around like that. No, just what happens is what exists. What happens is what exists. Now, that's the. And then when the gunas undifferentiated again, when the time goes out of the universe, then everything becomes avishisha. But that's not affecting Krishna because he's not made of gunas. You have a person sitting here. You may take a picture of a person, and you print the picture, then you rip the picture apart, but nothing happens to the person, just a picture. Or you take a picture of somebody, and you put it in the computer, you Photoshop, but nothing happens to the person. So we are all images of Krishna in the sense he has his body, has his world, and we also have our bodies, our world, but obviously it's temporary. He has his own eternal form. We play a role, we play the stage, and then we change always our bodies, even in this very life. We change our identities, always change. Next life. After thousands of generations, thousands of rebirth, we take a break, and we start again, and we take a break, start again. It's like that. Anyway, so these are a few, images or reflections on these topics. Any questions?
It's a very, very nice class. Thank you.
Wonderful class.
Yes. So you were briefly speaking about how the memories in the mind are not necessarily within the brain, but the brain affects them in this body. Is there anything?
Our connection with the memories, yes, it affects by the situation of the brain. Yes.
Yes. Do you know of any places in the Vedas or Puranas or anything that speaks about that, the relationship between the brain and the mind and memory?
Brain, mind, memory. There is this concept of samskara. Samskara means impressions. And these impressions is like the rat, you call it? Rat? R-U-T?
Rut.
Rut. It's like a rut on a record, no? That you can play it. It's there. But you need to somehow access it. Like an old record, no? So you have a record full of this recordings. They're there, and then you access it, and then it plays. So we have so many memories stored there. Like if I say New York, you all have memories of New York, and you can take it. Even if you have not been to New York, you have memories of New York. There's in movies, there's in news reports. There's so many, of course, Srila Prabhupada. And actually, we could go hours thinking about what we know about New York, or the sense, the emotions we have in relation to New York. And when we were talking, probably nobody was talking about New York, thinking about New York. Okay, but as soon as you say New York, that sound triggers so many things. And we could talk hours about probably New York. Just because we've been so exposed to New York. I mean, somebody says it's the capital of the world. But just in relation to Srila Prabhupada in New York, There's so much information. What do people, everything else. And so you can see how much is there just above New York and in our minds. Now where it is, I would say I don't know, but it's in the subtle body somewhere. The subtle body has got an amazing capacity of storing information. And in one sense, we are a little bit privileged because in this day and age, we have seen how the storage capacity. I think Gabe, who can tell you, he went through, he saw it. Not many of us saw it. You remember the first floppy disks, those large kind of. Then there was the floppy disk for many years. Was what 1.3 megabytes, right?
Well,
the floppy disk.
the 5.5 inch was, I think, it was like 1.5 megabyte, and then the smaller floppy disk was 3.5.
Okay, 3.5. So, and basically it's nothing. I mean, many files we use nowadays that can't even. But we use it for years. No, remember hearing those things, trying to say it somehow. We had that experience, and then, but now obviously nobody will ever use it because now you can have a little pen drive, very little pen drive, with 4, 8, 16, 64 giga, which is how many times?
1 gigabyte to 1,000 megabyte.
So, 1 giga. So you have, in a smaller space, you have thousands, 60,000, 100,000 times what you had a few years ago. I mean, we're not talking, Jurassic Age, we're talking 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we saw, and then obviously it's become, and some of these pen drives are so small, some they are so small they're almost not user friendly because they're so small. Yeah. So easy to lose it. I mean, you can swallow them. It's so small. But there is a huge information. If you take those files out, you print them out, you can probably cover the whole Arizona with those images and things. So this is what I touched a little bit. There is this Achintya Shakti. It's inconceivable how we are equipped in the subtle body, and and that's completely gross. In fact, that's completely gross. That's just what do you call it? What are made of these memories? This device, memory device, what they're made of?
Silicon.
Silicon. So it's just some material things, some transformation of earth, maybe some fire for conductivity. But still there's so much power. So in the subtle body is much more. Shukshma Sarita is much more, and it basically doesn't take any space. And what about the soul? So the whole person is there. And in fact it doesn't take any space at all. Like that. So the general direction is there. And of course we were talking the other night how experience like out-of-body experience demonstrate that we can actually have experience, perception, remembrance even when we are outside the body, and so on and so forth. And we have memories. See, I think of reincarnation. People do have memories from previous lives, and sometimes demonstrated they cannot have those memories in those lives that they make those experiences. And it's so recorded. And it's not in the brain, because the brain is new. It's brand new. That brain never touched that information. So it must be from somewhere else. And there's that what was his name? Ian Stevenson or Ian
Stevenson.
Huh?
Ian Stevenson.
Ian.
University of Virginia.
Okay. He made those researches, and then he made further researches, even so that people had birth scars, and it connected with how they died. Some people were shot dead. They still had in the new body. They still had the wound. You read this whole book with pictures and things. People have been, say, tied or tortured. They still have the marks on the new arms, because somehow that shaped the subtle body so much. When you put the subtle body in another body, it still has the shape. It still has the trauma. You know, it's like we have a trauma with snakes. Then you see a rope. It's nothing to do with it. It's just you have it inside. So many things. So many. Some crazy thing. Once I read an article. It was a man had a heart transplant, and he started having urges, the cravings for Kentucky Fried Chicken, which he never liked in his life. And then they found out that the person who gave him the heart, he was a Kentucky Fried Chicken addict. I don't know honestly about that. Somehow, weird things happen. But again, certainly we could amass a number of empirical. One thing about, because of your question, where is the Vedas, and I'm kind of avoiding the question. One thing we need to understand, that the way of processing knowledge in the Vedas, and the way of processing knowledge in the modern world is a little different, because the modern world, they want to understand the laws of nature, they want to understand the details so they can replicate and control. They're not just studying or meditating. They want to actually do something with that, which generally means to dominate, control, get power, make money, or whatever. The Vedas is a little different. So when they talk about the mind, when they talk about even the planets, they just, it's how you're going to use it. You need to understand how it works. And so it's not really to kind of replicate that. Besides, I don't think you can replicate on a separate mind. But at least it's you, so you know how to control the mind, how to use it, like that. So sometimes they may not give, we could say, the details in the same style. They know that it's not the same thing, because they're not trying to build an atom bomb or things like that. In fact, there are some scriptures, there's some text, like even about Vimana, Vidya, that they say, we're not going to write everything, because this can be misused very, very easy. Can be very easy. Once, I was before joining, I read a little novel by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury was a science fiction, science fiction writer, and this very short novel. It was in China, some Chinese kingdom. Somebody learned how to fly. He just developed some wings, and they started flying. And then this was brought to the attention of the emperor. The emperor saw, he just killed the guy. And then he told the secretary, does anybody know about this? No. If you mention one word of this, I'll kill you too. And that was the old novel. It was a short story. In other words, he understood. This is the beginning of something very dangerous. Because the guy would start flying with stones, throw the stones on people's head, and all that. And after, before you know it, you have all people flying around, throwing stones at each other, throwing bombs, which is what's happening. Drones, Anyway, it's just, You wanted to say something? Time is up, actually.
Okay.
So, I don't know if we have a...
Yeah,
Sure.
I just was wondering, I've read that the subtle body is burnt up in the fire body.
So you wanted me to comment, or was this a comment?
No, just the question is, so the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, falsely, it's all material.
Yeah.
Okay, but when it is burnt up, and we still have the spiritual intelligence, the purified mind. Is that it?
You see, sometimes the language of bhakti, especially of bhakti, Srila Goswami, sometimes a little bit of mystical language, a little bit of poetic language. So it can be sometimes a little bit allegorical. So burn, it may not be necessarily burned in the physical sense, like you have a piece of paper, you burn it and it dissolves in the atmosphere. It may mean, now I'm not sure what verse or what passages you refer to, but it's more like an image to say that all the contents which are, we could say the vasanas, the desires, they get burned, they get destroyed, the karma gets destroyed. In other words, you have the seeds of desire, seeds of plans, and then those seeds get removed. Obviously, it's not that the mind gets burned, otherwise we will all be like zombies. But that's not what actually means. And again, I don't know exactly what passage you are. So it's an image to say that the contents, the anarthas means unwanted things which are not productive, all the contents, they get burned. But obviously it's not in the literal sense. It's not that you forget everything. It's not you forget where you were born, or things like that, or the name of your parents. It doesn't really mean that. It means that they get neutralized. All the experiences, they get neutralized. Like that, Kulashika Maharaj said, when I think of sex life, my mouth turns in disgust, I spit at the throat. Yamunachar. Yeah. So in other words, it's not that he forgot. The Yamunacharya, he had the experience, he became a king, he had a lot of concubines and stuff. So it's not that he forgot that he had sex, but that remembrance was that emotional content of that attachment, of that taste, of that attraction, that affinity, that appeal, it was totally neutralized. To the point was that I think of sex, but even it didn't. If it comes to his mind, it's just like some devotee may feel, maybe some drug experience, or smoking this or smoking that, or eating meat is even more graphic. We may remember eating meat, but you're attracted to that. If you the chicken, So it's not that the memory is destroyed, but it gets the potential of attachment, the potential of material contamination, that gets neutralized.
I just had a continuation on that. Is that you were in the class a couple days ago? You're saying that the soul is the knower, the soul is the doer. So, I guess in the material senses, the material mind and senses, does the soul itself, as we are, we are the soul, does this have senses, spiritual senses?
Oh yeah, of course.
But they're different than the subtle body and the material body. So there's different receptive senses that are part of the spiritual body. That's what I'm saying.
See, the real senses are only in the spiritual body. Then they get departmentalized. Like you have eyes, there's an analogy, you have eyes. Then you see, you put this, what do you call it?
Blinders.
Binocular, okay? So you see things a little differently. But still you see with your eyes. The binocular only processes certain light in a certain way. Through the lenses, they become bigger. Or say you have night goggles, they're called. You see in the night. Still, you still see with your eyes. But you see, because whatever, it fills the light, like the cats see in the night because the pupil expands so much. So I don't know what exactly these night goggles do, but I don't know, they expand the light. No, there's a very good percentage what it seems like is big, but still is only the eyes that they see. And so on. You can give you see, you put a pink shades, you see everything pinkish, but still is your eyes. So only the eyes of the soul see. And the eyes of the soul, the senses of the soul, they are the soul. We say the senses of the soul is a difference of reference, not of essence. We are the body. We are a spiritual body. But now it's kind of in a seed form, but everything is there. So only the soul sees. And these eyes are just meant so that we can see and interact with matter. And they are designed for certain range of matter. Like we don't hear ultrasounds. Huh? We don't see infrared or ultraviolet. But there are species who hear ultrasound. A dog hears ultrasounds. There's a whistle for dog. We don't hear anything. But they hear. It is very, very high pitch. So it's a different set of senses. Different set of senses. Sometimes it's just more powerful senses. An eagle can see. Sometimes, I don't know, I was reading, I don't remember the exact distance, but like an eagle, if an eagle could read the newspaper for a kilometer or 2 kilometers. Something like that. The eyes are like, I don't know, like 1/3 of the head or something like that. Imagine reading a newspaper 1 kilometer. But you could see. So that's just more. And different, smell. Dogs at the airport that smell drugs. You can't smell drugs, unless you're maybe expert. But even that, you can't do what the dog can do with his nose. But still, even in the dog, is the nose of the soul that smells. And because they have a particular apparatus that filters or the receptors. And so the receptors are different. But only the soul sees. It's not the receptor. Okay? So now we'll use our taste receptors, I guess. Jai Gata Bhashan Bhagavati.